Yeah, I guess we do. We have immediately another session, and that will be about the future of net zero real estate. And that session is powered by Building Minds. So I would like to welcome Jens Hirsch and Jan Sommerfeld from Building Minds on the stage. Are you both ready?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes, ready to
great. We
go.
can hear you. Welcome. Where are you from? Germany?
Yes, Berlin.
Well, great. Great to have you with us. I think I will give you the floor for the first couple of minutes, and then maybe afterwards I will gonna ask you some questions. Is that okay?
Yep, perfect.
Cool.
Okay, let me share my screen and we can get started. Okay, looks good. So, as my colleague Katarina, I think, already teased, we wanted to look at the future of net zero in real estate and what we, with our Building Minds platform that we're developing, aim to contribute to that. So she was talking about 7 steps towards decarbonizing your portfolio. And we'll do our best to fit all these 7 steps now into 15 minutes. So let's get started. And we decided to actually try something different this time and kind of work our way backwards, because actually everybody, what everybody wants or what everybody should want is actually to find that perfect decarbonization roadmap for your portfolio. So what kind of retrofits to do at what point in time for which buildings, so that you can meet your emission targets with the minimum cost or something that is actually feasible. And so in order to do that, we want to analyze all the possible combinations for these retrofit measures. So it's really running complex simulations to look at all the buildings in the portfolio, all the different possibilities for energetic retrofits, looking at the cost, looking at savings for energy cost, and how to actually reduce the overall operational carbon footprint of the portfolio, and therefore find the most effective CapEx distribution into these retrofits of different buildings. And so this can have then different targets. This can be how to have the biggest possible carbon savings within your budget that you can allocate, or other way around, like how much CapEx do you need to actually meet these net zero targets or whichever carbon target you set for your company. And so in order to do that, we have a great team of data scientists that work on regression models and machine learning to actually take these factors all into consideration with the appropriate weights to find the, so to say, the sweet spot or the best break even here. And of course, it's still a model. So models are somewhat simplifying the reality, but we're working really hard to get more and more data points onto our platform so that we can come closer to really model and predict the impact in a very realistic scenario. So including lease contracts when you have vacancies in your building, what kind of government financial incentives are available in which country, what kind of energy sources are actually available in which country, and what kind of emissions factors we can put on them for the calculation. And of course, material costs, construction, availability of service providers, and so on. So this is an ongoing refinement process. And what you can see in the bottom right is that, of course, you're looking as an asset manager as your economic break even. So how much do I invest into my assets? How can I reduce energy costs, for example? But what we want to bring into the equation is then the ecological break even. So I have an emission target. These different retrofits all have embodied carbon. So I'm putting something in there first to then have these savings. And now our goal is actually to bring these two together and actually see, okay, how much does it cost me to save a ton of CO2, or how much can I save in taxation or energy cost when I reduce my carbon footprint. So going backwards now, the step before that is actually to analyze the retrofits that are already planned. So what we do is that we gather the available information on the portfolio CapEx plan, put that on a timeline, depending on the companies. This can be 2, 3, 5 years or more, and then see how these investments are distributed, what share of your CapEx is actually allocated to energetic retrofits, so not just getting a new kitchen or new bathrooms or something, but really reducing energy demand and thereby carbon emissions. And then compare this basically with the targets that you have set, and include estimations for embodied carbon of these retrofits, and then kind of look for that delta, look for the gap between what you're doing anyway and how much more you would have to do, or how much more you would have to invest to meet carbon emission targets. So to get there, step number 4 is to actually look at what is my target, what am I aiming for? And I would pass to Jens to go into some detail. Can't hear you yet, Jens.
So as Jan has already mentioned, so if we want to plan our retrofits and find an optimal way of combining different retrofits and the capex involved, we must know what finally to achieve. So in this event, everyone is talking about net zero, and many companies, also from the real estate sector, have pledged to align their economic activities, investments, and so on with the Paris targets of limiting global warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius. And we are using the CRREM pathways as benchmark for the real estate sector. CRREM, the acronym stands for Carbon Risk Real Estate Monitor, so focusing on transition risk, carbon risk, so the risk that assets face due to poor carbon efficiency and energy efficiency. So these pathways, CRREM pathways, have been aligned with the Paris climate targets, and so we are using them as a benchmark. They are specific for individual countries and property types, so there is a decarbonization pathway in terms of kilogram CO2 emissions per year per square meter for different countries and different property types. So analyzing the carbon performance of the buildings on our platform, we compare them and their performance with these CRREM pathways, and tell the user, for example, when a building will not meet these targets anymore in the future, so which is commonly denoted as a stranded asset. So stranding doesn't mean that it has no value at all, but you might face some costs in order to make the asset marketable and to not to lose market demand due to low carbon efficiency. So these costs could either mean that you have to pay higher carbon prices if you don't meet the targets anymore. So more and more countries are adopting carbon taxation systems. And so if you want to avoid these costs, you must invest in energetic retrofits in order to meet the targets. So one step backwards again before we can do these carbon risk analysis, checking when do buildings go stranded, or which share of buildings within my portfolio is going to be stranded at a certain point in time, because we have to know the operational carbon footprint of our individual buildings and the entire portfolio. So we've also developed dashboards and a data model around that and the underlying calculation methods that are necessary in order to convert carbon emissions, energy consumption, water consumption into carbon emissions. So Building Minds platform provides you with an overview of the different sources of your carbon emissions, broken down by different sources, and you can directly identify potential outliers and of course those buildings with the highest contribution to your overall carbon footprint, and by that you can also directly identify those buildings with the highest saving potentials. And can also do some analysis, like what would happen to my overall portfolio's carbon footprint if I acquire certain new buildings or if I sell individual buildings. And of course, all this information can be also used, can be exported in order to meet the requirements of different reporting standards like GRESB, EPRA, GRI, ECOR, etc. And now, of course, how do we get these carbon emissions? And now we are getting more and more closer to the data aspect of everything. So together with Microsoft, ComPlus, and RSCS, we've developed a common data model for real estate that allows to compare data from different sources and break down the different data silos. So also with regards to energy and different resources like waste, water, and fugitive emissions, we provide the user with a detailed breakdown of the different consumption types, and of course also to identify those biggest resource contributors, and everyone has to report these data again to these standards like GRESB and EPRA, and this can be also used in the platform. So now with the data aspect, I would like to hand back to Jan.
So going back to the first step then, how do we start with that? Of course, the challenge is always where's the data coming from? And that's also the question that we get the most and that we spend a lot of time to not just think about, but provide many different options and work on different tools to actually make sure that the data that is available can be imported to our platform, and that we can then fill the gaps. So that means we have standardized API connectors so that we can import this, for example, from utility provider platforms where you have your heating consumption or electricity consumption for buildings. This can also come directly from IoT sensors, from smart meters, or if some buildings are not so digitized yet, then we can also do it with, for example, survey apps where someone on site can just enter the known consumption or meter readings, for example. And of course, integrate and synchronize data from all other available sources like any ERP system, CAFM or BMS. And then we're also looking into some other options to, for example, extract this information directly from documents. So this can be an energy certificate if this is available. This can also, of course, be an invoice from a utility provider. So trying to make sure that we get this data that we need to do all these other steps actually onto the platform first requires, as Jens already said, a processing to actually normalize and harmonize that data to make sure that all this can actually be put together in one bucket and it still makes sense and we can compute it. So that's why we have the common data model. And then as part of this automated data processing, there's of course some validation to make sure that the data comes in actually makes sense, is somewhat plausible, that you don't have any errors in there, standardizing this data, so different units, for example, and then we extrapolate the data gaps. So based on the building characteristics that we know of, that we have in the digital twin, for example, that then allows us to also extrapolate missing consumption data to really have a full picture on the portfolio. And as part of that, we are also, of course, looking into, or not just looking into, but implementing transparency features so that you can really see how many buildings actually reported the consumption data for a particular year, which buildings were estimated, what is the level of accuracy on that, how is our reporting coverage increasing over time, so that you can really see, okay, where do I have some gaps that would really help me get more accurate results, and then internally investigate or make sure that you can connect those as well. And also, of course, then when you put everything together on one platform, you still have to know where it comes from. So if you find maybe some discrepancies, you can investigate and see, okay, where is this data coming from? Who contributed? Which one is expected to be more accurate than another one? You can replace estimations then with actually metered data. So this is the starting point, and we have a commercial team also to help you, to a professional services team to help you find the right connections to your existing ecosystem of different platforms, and how to get the right data from there. Now, if you paid attention, we had 6 steps only. So the 7th step that we have then, that we put at the end, is, of course, a continuous monitoring and refinement of this retrofit roadmap. So it's not about just doing it once and then having a plan, putting it on the wall. We all know that the world is changing. It's super hard to predict the future. And we have so many factors that are constantly changing. It's not only new consumption data coming in. This is evaluation of assets, asset transactions. You have shifts in your portfolio that impact your total carbon emissions, for example, and evaluating the actual impact of retrofits that were implemented, and really make sure that the predictions then actually turn out to be correct, or where you have to readjust. And then we have changing carbon prices, changing regulations that go into the consideration. Always increasing the quality of the data that is available, changes in lease contracts, building vacancies. So of course, what we want to build with this tool, or what we focus on, is not just reporting it once, having it one time, and then starting all over again next year for the next report, but really have a platform where all people involved can access the information and contribute the information, update it, and then always kind of refine this plan that you have. So to make sure that you always have the best possible prediction at this point with the information that is available to you. And now this is more of the why we do it and what we work on. In the afternoon, today at 1:30, our colleague Thomas Brunner is also doing a demo of the platform and can show a bit more of how this then actually looks like and answer some questions that you might have. But with a few minutes remaining, we would also, of course, be very happy to answer some of the questions that came up already.
Yeah, amazing. Yeah, I think this is a really amazing topic. I have a couple of questions for you guys. And of course, it's going to be some questions about data first, but I also have some more questions for you guys. But how do you import data from all these different kind of sources within buildings?
So yeah, as I indicated, we have a standard connector that then can connect to either existing APIs of other platforms where you have your portfolio data about your buildings or your energy consumption data, or also we have custom connectors that can actually take this from a front end. So when you can log into your Vattenfall portal, for example, where you have this, then we have different options to connect to that directly, so that you stay in sync with that.
And who has access to this data? Who can all see the outcomes?
That's a good question, because I think that's always a really important part, to make sure that everybody can see what they need to see, but not more and not less. So we actually implemented a quite complex authorization system. So we're working with a single sign-on, for example, that you can use for your Active Directories that you already have in your company, and then make sure that depending on the person's role, they can either only contribute data to it, or see information only for a particular building or for a particular sub-portfolio, or really give them access to everything that they need to see.
And can I export the underlying data and see the reports?
Sure, yeah, of course. I think the important part is that the data is yours as a client. So you're in charge, you have it. You can do whatever you want with it. You can use it on the platform. You can export it via API to some other platforms. You can export it to your Excel if you want to do something else there, create your reports, your presentations, or export it for reporting purposes, of course.
Well, how many buildings do you do already now with your platform?
That's a tough one. I don't know the latest number. I think we're definitely somewhere in 5 digits. So I guess my colleague Thomas can tell that in the afternoon, a bit more precise.
But it's a lot. And then the final question that I have, we are now 2.5 days in this event, and a lot of people talk about the net zero pledge that they make for 2030 or 2040 to become net zero with their buildings or with their whole portfolio. But how do you look into that? Because is it possible already to make already some steps right now?
well, of course, they're like the sooner the better. I think the important part where we want to help is to actually do the right steps at the right time. So there is some risk of like jumping in and then suddenly getting locked in that you do everything that has high returns now, and then you have a really hard time getting the last 20%. And I think it's also a really interesting conversation of what actually counts. So there's a difference if you actually modernize your buildings and really reduce your own emissions, or if you're just paying someone to plant trees somewhere else. That's good as well, but I think there are different ways of how to tackle that problem and how really to make the best contribution on your end and within your powers.
But there are many uncertain parameters, and that's why also we offer the possibility to do different scenarios. So check what would happen if emission factors or whatever CapEx investment conditions develop in that way or in another way, and to set up different retrofit scenarios and checking what would be the impact of those.
Yeah, cool. Well, thank you very much to inspire us on what you do with Building Minds. Well, we're really looking forward to the panel and the round table that you have later this afternoon. So please go there as well. So thank you, Jan, and thank you, Jens, for being with us, and hope to see you soon.
Thank you.
Thanks.
See you then.
Bye-bye.